Yes or no? That's the simple choice that voters will be given when it comes to legalising cannabis in the referendum to be held at the general election next year. If the public votes to legalise the drug's recreational use, anyone wishing to buy or use cannabis will have to be at least 20, and it will have to be consumed in people's homes or licensed premises. I asked Justice Minister Andrew Little where Labor sits on the cannabis question.
Right now, our position is to make sure that the referendum runs well, is conducted properly, that people get good information, so that the decision, once it is made by 2.9 million voters, is one that is clear-cut, it's unequivocal, we know what the result is, and we know what the consequences of that result is.
So in terms of it being a binding referendum, will it be a simple majority?
Yeah, that's the nature of referendums, yes. Look, we were very determined to make sure, I was very determined to make sure that this is a yes-no vote. It's very simple, and we know what no means, it's the status quo. We know what yes means, and knowing what yes means we get this draft legislation out. It is like any other legislation. All the questions you'd expect to be answered are in it, the level of regulation, the level of control. People know what they're voting about.
In your press statement today, you asked National Party to commit to respecting the will of the people in terms of the outcome of this vote. What conversations have you had with Simon Bridges or anyone from the National Party about whether they will do that?
Well, I haven't had any conversations specifically about that. The conversations that I've had in passing with national MPs have been along the lines of, not quite sure, we want to see what you're going to do, all that sort of thing. Now, the Cabinet has mandated me to set up a cross-party working group, so I will send out letters to leaders of all parties in Parliament in the next week or so.
Have they even committed to being part of that, Minister?
No, they haven't, no. And, look, I understand this is a political environment, this is a deeply political question. In the end, from the government's point of view, what we wanted to make sure is that we have a referendum that is well-informed, the voters are well-informed, they're making an informed choice, and we live by the result. But it would be nice if the National Party would confirm what their stance on the result, regardless of what it is, would be.
So have you had conversations about them being involved in the cross-party working group?
As I said, letters will go out next week inviting leaders to send somebody along to be part of that group, and we'll see what comes out.
But you've had no conversations ahead of that?
No, we thought it was the time to set up the working group is once we get to this particular decision. We made some high-level and principal decisions just before Christmas. We've now made this decision about how the format of the question, if you like. We're now going to fill up the content of the draft legislation that we want to put in place. We want to engage with various stakeholders, experts, doctors, scientists, others in the field, those dealing with this issue, to put together the legislation. We would like as many parties as possible to be involved in that, but they're going to have to make that judgment themselves.
Just quickly, are you comfortable with the suggested age of 20 years?
We came to that point. My strong view was there had to be an age an age restriction on it. When you look around at other jurisdictions, it's anywhere between sort of 18 and 21. I know, and I've long had the view and the understanding about the impact of cannabis consumption on young brains. The human brain doesn't complete its development until roughly the mid-20s. We've stated in the paper that went to Cabinet that one of the objectives of any legalisation, if approved by the electorate, would be to, as much as possible, delay first use. And the more
do you not think it a little...
You can really only do that in a regulated and controlled environment, which is one of the objectives.
Isn't it a bit strange having that set at 20 and alcohol at 18?
They're two different substances. I mean, they're both toxic substances, it is true, but there are things that marijuana can do on the brain that alcohol doesn't do. So, and I think part of the education campaign is explaining that while there are some similarities to these substances, there are also differences, and it's about knowing what the risks of harm are in each case. But in relation to marijuana, knowing that there is the risk of harm and what you do to mitigate that.
Would legalising cannabis in this country be transformational, or would it be a mistake?
Well, in the end, that's going to be the verdict that the 2.9 million voters will get to cast.
I'm asking you, Minister.
Well, other countries have done it. That's not a reason why we should do it, but it is a perennial question that comes up. There have been various attempts at getting the debate going about it. I think until you kind of get it to a crunch point, you don't get to have a decent, thoroughgoing debate. So one of the objectives of this exercise is by holding a referendum is that you create the space to get best possible information. I mean, you'll get a lot of rogue.
So would it be transformational or not, legalising? Transformational or a mistake? Which would it be?
Well, that's not my judgment to make. My judgment is, given that there is an arrangement or an agreement between not only two of the parties in government, but now a decision by Cabinet to not only have the referendum, but the way in which it's going to be conducted, is to make sure that referendum happens. People will make their judgment about this, about whether it's transformational, about whether they want to even do it. That's a judgment that 2.9 million voters will make. It's not my job to go characterising particular decisions of the electorate.
Have you made up your mind which way you're going to go on it?
Look, I have a view about it. I don't think it helps for me to share my view. In the end, these things are a secret ballot. My job as Minister...
so you don't have the courage of whatever convictions you have to state it publicly?
No, I think it's important, now that it is very clear that the decision is one for 2.9 million voters, is for them to be able to make that decision based on the information that gets put in the public arena. I don't think you need politicians parading around now saying, what their particular view is. This isn't a decision that's going to be made by 20 MPs around a cabinet table or 120 MPs in Parliament. It'll be made by 2.9 million voters.
And that's Justice Minister Andrew Little.